I think the value of an institute at Fairleigh Dickinson dedicated to sustainable enterprises is it gives the new generation a chance to connect the dots between human resources and people. The middle part of my book is called People, Inc. It's about the value of people, talent, and capital and innovation. It allows you to connect it to the environment. It allows you to connect the issue of energy to the environment, and it allows you to connect all of them to money. All right, so I put in this slide some of the sub-themes in the book related to that. Well, it took me 30 years to figure that out. It took me 5 or 6 books and lots of consulting gigs to figure out how to connect these dots. You see what I'm saying? So the benefit of your institute, and the reason why I encourage all of you that are here to actively be involved in its incubator, to actively be involved in the management school, to actively be involved in the institute, is that you can leapfrog and leap forward a generation and not take those 30 years. That's the most fundamental ground for hope that I'd like to convey to you in this slide. It took too long for me to see. My first 3 books were books about how to make the government change in regulation. I wrote a book called Beyond Dumping, a book called America's Future in Hazardous Waste Management, a book called In Search of Environmental Excellence. And then I came to realize that regulation is less than half of the pair of scissors. It's about getting within the corporate mind frame, getting within those large mansions, and leveraging social need. Okay? So that's what I'm trying to describe to you. Now, next slide is the why. And I think it's really useful. I want to give you my email at this point and our web page so that you can see that we would like to correspond with each of you. My email is bruce@ahcgroup.com, and that's Lily, L-I-L-Y, @ahcgroup.com. The web page on this book is worldincbook.com. But I think I've gotten it down to 6 fundamental reasons why social response capitalism is not a fad. And I'd like to talk with you each about these over time. Related to the question of return on investment, I think the major reason why a Whirlpool is pursuing the Duet series, or some of these other firms like Electrolux are making white goods more efficient, is they could make more margin on it. Because wealthier, smarter people are going to pay 35% more for a product and allow the firm to keep a larger margin of profit if they understand the payback of efficiency, right? So that margin improvement is one of the reasons this is happening. When you look at firms like Intel or Honeywell, rapid cycle time, you can evolve products faster. You can go from the Prius 1 to the Prius 2 in 20 months rather than the usual 36. The biggest one that I want you to visualize is global market access. There are people at the Wharton School of Business who are becoming quite famous for their work on the bottom of the pyramid. There are 4 billion people out there that are beginning to look at new computing, new transportation, new forms of housing that need to be affordable in this World Inc. framework. Firms are doing it for product differentiation. It is now, another book I'd recommend you read along these lines that was formative for my thinking is the man who was the consultant to Nike and the consultant to Starbucks. His name is Scott Bedbury. He convinced Nike at the key moment of its growth that women want to be as athletic as men. That was his information base, all right, in the mid-'80s. Duh. But that's how Nike grew for 15 years. He convinced Starbucks that people would want to buy community and a living room access rather than just $3 for coffee and foam, right? So I recommend you read Scott Bedbury's A Brand New World. He told me that it was torture to write the book, and I can believe it, but it's a very well-written book. And essentially, it's about product differentiation and brand. Bedbury. He's indexed in here. The last, and in fact, if you go to worldincbook.com, you just put in the word Bedbury, and you'll come up with all the links. Social bundling of value in products. This is a whole new concept that I hope sustainability institutes begin to teach classes in, think about that it's likely that when you're willing to pay more for a car or more for a computer or more for a home, it's because you're buying social definition. You're buying something that says, this is my place in the world. I think we know that. But now efficiency is part of that social bundling. Right? So there's a tendency to value that. And the biggest one, where John Cusack is one of the fundamental leaders, is reducing your risk premium. In order to attract capital, all industry sectors have normally been given a common risk premium. All tobacco companies judge the same, oil companies judge the same, all automaker companies judge the same. My work is really about the reason why a Toyota or an HP or a Suncor in petroleum is seeking a different risk premium from its lenders. Why they're saying we're less risky than others. And that's a huge change that I think is now beginning to happen. To come in for the close, let me try and visualize this in another way. I remember, if we go to the next slide, I remember when I was a student, those of you, the students in the back, 30 years ago as a pre-med student at Cornell, I had the good fortune of winning a $400 grant to invite anybody I wanted to speak at Sage Chapel at Cornell. And by good fortune, I came across a book called Small is Beautiful by A.F. Schumacher. And I wrote him a letter and asked him to come to Cornell, and he spoke. And it changed my life. And one of the things that he talked about is that innovation is always about enabling others to have the buoyancy and lift to create new balloons of opportunity. And so I think social response capitalism is really about new customers and markets. It's really about answering these evolving state and federal regulations that I had you map out in those 4 maps. It's about dealing with NGOs and not-for-profits and with having something to talk about, right, rather than just a complaint. This is the new buoyancy and lift of competing on price, quality, and social need. So the last thing I want you to visualize is, as you think about these things, understand that in some industries, it's going to be 88% price, 7% quality, and only 1% social need. But sometimes that 1% will be key. I remember working for 7 years for cement makers called Holnam, owned by Schmidt-Jaime, who created the World Council on Sustainable Development. People have made cement for 100 years, and you figured, where's the leverage point on social needs? Well, in the end, Holnam grew by consuming animal carcasses during times of some public risk in the making of cement, by consuming some hazardous waste that was problems in their communities. And they actually improved their competitive posture in a very, very calcified industry. So I believe that if you begin to think of the variables as price, quality, and social needs, there'll be some industries like foot apparel with Nike, where Nike is doing some renewable investments that don't have a 27-year payback because they have so much room for social need competition, right? Not just price and quality. So I think that's the new variable. Go to the next slide, and then we're coming in for a couple of visualizations, and then we're going to open it up to questions. Unless you want a question right now. Let's see if there's a question right now. Yes, ma'am, again.
You talk about the Prius, which for the high margin products that are available here in United States, in Western Europe. But in developing countries, the social need is much higher, for example, air pollution. But these products, the people in those countries, they don't have enough purchasing power to actually purchase this type of product. What would be, in your opinion, what would be the strategy for the company, or how can we achieve that type of goal?
What you're asking is beyond what I have thought, but it's great that you're asking that question. You see what I'm saying? Because it's new